top Putin ally issued a dark warning after European leaders refused to reduce diplomatic presence inside Kyiv recently. Dmitry Medvedev sparked alarm after mocking European governments, suggesting they apparently had diplomats to spare inside Kyiv publicly. The European Union defied Moscow's evacuation warning, while Medvedev hinted at potentially deadly consequences for foreign diplomatic missions afterward. Russia's escalating rhetoric surrounding Kyiv fueled fears that European diplomatic missions could increasingly become targets during future escalation phases. Medvedev's trim the headcount remark intensified concerns after Moscow warned foreigners to leave Kyiv before possible retaliatory strikes unfold. A top Putin aide threatened European leaders after they ignored Russia's latest warning surrounding escalating tensions linked to Kyiv recently. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev mocked European governments publicly during a sharply worded post shared online through social media. Medvedev criticized the European Union for continuing diplomatic operations inside Ukraine's capital despite mounting Russian military threats recently nationwide. The remarks followed Moscow's warning urging foreigners to leave Kyiv before possible systematic strikes targeting the Ukrainian capital unfold. Dmitry Medvedev said, and I quote, "The EU has said it will maintain its diplomatic presence in Kyiv unchanged, despite Russia's warnings. Well, apparently they've got diplomats to spare and need to trim the headcount." Unquote. Russia increased pressure on Europe by signaling possible escalation connected to continuing attacks and rising tensions surrounding the ongoing conflict. Despite Moscow's warnings, the European Union announced it would maintain diplomatic missions and personnel inside Kyiv without any reductions. Anua El-Anouni said, and I quote, "We will not change our position or presence in Kyiv. Russian attacks, unfortunately, are daily reality both in Kyiv and in other parts of Ukraine. Russia is once again trying to cynically shift the blame for its own aggression, Russia's aggressive war against Ukraine, onto Ukraine." Unquote. Russia earlier accused European leaders of allowing Ukraine complete freedom despite escalating attacks and growing regional instability recently nationwide. European officials dismissed Moscow's warnings as intimidation tactics designed primarily to spread fear and pressure Western governments politically afterward. The escalating rhetoric fueled fears that Russia could intensify military strikes against Kyiv during the already volatile conflict phase anytime. Medvedev's latest remarks further deepened international concerns surrounding possible Russian escalation and broader confrontation involving European nations directly. Moscow said the EU's silence has encouraged fresh Ukrainian strikes on civilian targets. A Russian foreign ministry official made the remarks in comments carried by the Izvestia newspaper, according to TASS. Rodion Miroshnik said Europe was deliberately ignoring what Moscow described as Ukraine's violations of international and humanitarian law. Rodion Miroshnik said, and I quote, "This, war crimes, is one of the important issues that will undoubtedly arise on the negotiation track. The question here is whether international humanitarian law in the form of the Geneva Conventions, additional protocols, and a whole list of conventions should be swept under the rug, or whether international humanitarian law is binding on everyone. If it is binding on everyone, then Europe will have to admit that Kyiv committed such crimes." Unquote. EU leaders condemned Russia's latest strikes but did not mention the reported attack on the dormitory in Starobelsk. Russian authorities said 21 people were killed and another 60 were injured in Starobelsk. Moscow said most of those killed in the dormitory strike were teenage girls. Russian officials said Ukrainian drones hit the main college building and dormitory in 3 waves. Russia later launched what it described as a massive retaliatory strike on Ukraine. Moscow said the attack involved Oreshnik, Iskandar, Kinshal, and Zircon missile systems. The Russian Defense Ministry said command posts, air bases, and defense plants were hit. Ursula von der Leyen accused Moscow of brutality and of showing disregard for human life. Kodja Korlis described Russia's actions as a political scare tactic after the strikes. Macron vowed to increase support for Ukraine, while Merz called the escalation reckless. Reports said none of those European leaders referred to the deadly Starobelsk dormitory attack. Maria Zakharova said the BBC and CNN had rejected Moscow's invitation to visit the site. Russia dramatically escalated the war by announcing systematic retaliatory strikes targeting military and command infrastructure across Kyiv immediately. Moscow warned foreigners and diplomats to leave Kyiv before launching what it called systematic retaliatory military operations nationwide. Russia said the strikes were retaliation for last week's Ukrainian drone attack inside Russian-controlled territory near Starobelsk recently. Moscow accused Ukraine of targeting a college dormitory in Staroselsk during the deadly drone strike on May 22. Russian officials claimed the attack killed 21 people, injured over 60 others, and deliberately targeted children inside the facility. Ukraine denied intentionally attacking civilians, insisting its forces targeted drone coordination and military-linked operational infrastructure instead across territories. Moscow called the incident further proof of what it described as Kyiv's terrorist and Nazi nature during escalating tensions. Russian officials warned Kyiv's command centers, military headquarters, and decision-making facilities would become direct operational targets immediately nationwide. Russia also urged foreign citizens, diplomats, and international organizations to evacuate Kyiv immediately before further escalation unfolds across Ukraine. Residents throughout Kyiv were advised to avoid government, military, and administrative locations vulnerable to possible Russian strikes immediately nationwide. The warning followed one of Russia's heaviest coordinated missile and drone assaults since the Ukraine war originally began years ago. Russian forces reportedly used drones, cruise missiles, and Oreshnik hypersonic missiles during recent large-scale coordinated attacks across Ukraine. Ukrainian officials reported extensive destruction across Kyiv, including severe damage to homes, schools, and major civilian infrastructure facilities nationwide. President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Moscow of deliberately terrorizing civilians through relentless bombardments targeting cities and infrastructure across Ukraine.
Шановні українці, сьогодні відночі всюди, де потрібно, працюють рятувальники та необхідні служби. Всім, хто був поранений, цим ударом буде надана допомогу. Це наш обов'язок, і держава його виконає. Я вдячний кожному і кожній, хто працює на місцях після ударів, щоб допомогти нашим людям. Зараз відомо, що постраждали щонайменше 83 людини від початку доби. На жаль, є загиблі. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. Важкий був удар, ракет різних типів 90, із них багато балістики 36, 600 дронів. На жаль, не всю балістику вдалося збити. Найбільше влучань у Києві, і саме Київ був основною мішенню цієї російської атаки. Путін вже і слово «ура» не може нормально вимовити, шамкає, а все ще своїми ракетами перемагає житлові будинки. 3 російські ракети проти об'єкта водопостачання, спалив ринок, десятки житлових будинків пошкодив, кілька звичайних шкіл, запустив свій Орешник проти Білої церкви, реально неадеквати. Важливо, щоб це для Росії не залишалось без наслідків. Сьогодні кожен у світі, хто не промовчить, хто допомагатиме Україні, є захисником життя. Дуже важливо продовжувати працювати, щоб було ППО для України, зокрема проти балістики. Мати Росію поруч – це постійна загроза. Наші люди в Україні цю загрозу стримують і зупиняють, але світу варто чітко бачити, з ким маєте справу. 5-й рік повномасштабної війни. І від перших секунд це неспровокована терористична війна Росії проти життя. Ми робимо все, щоб встановити мир і захистити людей. Все. І важливо, щоб Україна була не наодинці. Потрібні рішення і від Сполучених Штатів Америки, і від Європи, і від інших, щоб цей старий Орешник в Москві вимовив слово «мир». Дякую всім, хто допомагає. Слава Україні!
Meanwhile, Sergei Lavrov issued a chilling warning to Marco Rubio, urging evacuation of the American embassy from Kyiv immediately. Russia's foreign minister reportedly gave Rubio advance notice regarding upcoming Russian strikes targeting infrastructure and military facilities inside Kyiv. Lavrov said Russian forces would launch attacks against Ukrainian military-linked infrastructure and key operational command centers across the capital. Moscow also urged the United States and allied nations to evacuate citizens from Kyiv before tensions escalate even further. Despite worsening tensions, Lavrov and Rubio reportedly agreed to continue diplomatic engagement aimed at preventing broader international escalation ahead. Lavrov accused European leaders and Kyiv authorities of undermining earlier American-brokered peace initiatives through aggressive political and military actions. Russian ministry statement read, and I quote, on instructions from Russia's President Vladimir Putin, Sergei Lavrov officially conveyed to the US side that in response to the Kyiv regime's continued terrorist attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure on Russian territory. The armed forces of the Russian Federation are launching systematic and consistent strikes against facilities located in Kyiv that are used for the needs of the Ukrainian military, as well as against the relevant decision-making centers. Sergei Lavrov drew attention to the Russian Foreign Ministry statement of May 25, which recommended that the US, along with other countries with diplomatic missions in Kyiv, ensure the evacuation of their diplomatic personnel and other citizens from a Ukrainian capital. The minister recalled the agreement on the Ukrainian conflict reached at the highest level at the proposal of the US in Anchorage in August 2025, and expressed regret that the aggressive efforts of the European elites and the Kyiv regime are undermining these agreements, which had opened the way to a sustainable long-term settlement based on a balance of interests. They exchanged assessments of diplomatic initiatives aimed at overcoming the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz and of the situation surrounding Cuba. Sergei Lavrov and Marco Rubio reaffirmed their mutual commitment, notwithstanding known differences, to step up efforts to normalize the working conditions of the diplomatic missions of Russia and the US on each other's territory, unquote.
Did you guys give it a cold Lavrov? He said in the readout that he's trying to encourage the U.S. to withdraw staff from Kyiv. Did you talk to him?
Well, they sent a notice to all the embassies, and I think he was just calling to personally tell me. They told all the embassies to Kyiv's going to be a very dangerous place. But Kyiv's been a very dangerous place now for a number of years. Look, the danger in all of these wars as they continue and they go on is that they always have the threat of escalation, of spreading into something new. So I spoke to him yesterday about that and a couple other topics, and obviously that Putin had asked him to call me to relay the message directly to the president, which I did, but obviously we had already seen the notice sent out to all the diplomatic facilities. And I said, right now there's no active, scheduled negotiations ongoing with Ukraine, but the U.S. is always prepared to play a constructive and helpful role if that opportunity presents itself.
What about these big Russian strikes in Kyiv? It's some of the biggest,
Well, this is what happens with these wars. I mean, they just continue to escalate. There's a big strike coming one way, the bigger strike coming back, and that's how these things unravel and keep going. And it's why the war needs to come to an end. And look, every time you see these big strikes from one side or the other, it's a reminder of why this is a terrible war that's now gone on longer than the Second World War, and it needs to come to an end. And the U.S. stands ready and prepared to help do whatever we can to help facilitate the end of this war. And hopefully the opportunity will present itself at some point that we can play that role again.